So we've been going through the book of Mark, and I think for a long time. So you think we'd be further than this, but we are in chapter 4 today. And I'm like, have we been doing this the whole year? So we are in Mark chapter 4 at the very beginning. And it goes like this. Again, Jesus began to teach by the lake. The crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got into a boat and sat in it out on the lake while the people were along the shore at the water's edge. He taught them many things by parables, and in his teaching said, "Listen, a farmer went out to sow his seed." I want to know when the exclamation points were added. Like at what point in translation history we're like, this was serious. As he was scattering the seeds, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on the rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Okay, scary. So that they did not bear grain. Still, other seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew, and produced a crop, some multiplying 30, some 60, some 100 times. Then Jesus said, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." So I grew up in church, so this parable is not new to me, and I've heard it in a few different ways, mainly we need to be good soil. And I love it. Here's the thing, before we even get into this parable, I want to just talk about the fact that Jesus speaks so often in parables, and parables themselves. Because here is the incredible thing about parables, is that when you use a parable, you give up control. Okay? Parables are never about information. They are always an invitation. Okay, the moment you begin to use a parable and speak in parables, now the burden becomes on the listener, and the listener becomes a participant in what you're trying to say. No one in the history, ever uses a parable if they are trying to control an audience and tell them what to do. Because all the control is lost once you start saying things. If someone's like, "Hey, Jesus, what should we do?" And they're like, "Listen, there was a farmer." Okay, you're like, okay, already you're not there. This is not about information, okay? This is not about telling me exactly what to do. This is an invitation into me participating, finding myself in the story, and finding the information that I need and can distill in the story. And that is incredibly beautiful, and that should tell us something. I always think about parables, they are not God as information, but God as invitation, right? And we see even in Scripture the journey of going from something like the book of Deuteronomy and the 10 Commandments to where we get to the New Testament where Jesus is saying, actually, I'm going to open this whole thing up. I'm not giving you 10 Commandments. I'm not giving you the exact things. I'm just going to say there was some guy with a couple coins and he buried some, and someone over here, you're like, none of this is information, okay? None of this is actually factual things. These are all stories that you are asking us to find ourselves in, and that's very helpful because we are in Los Angeles in 2024. So even if it was something very clear and just information, who even knows if it would stand up, right? Who's even growing crops these days, okay? So that's already beautiful. And the idea of a parable is beautiful and it's important because we live in a time where information is more available to us than it's ever been. We are taking in more information than any other people group in history. Like just this morning, I have already taken in information about election polls and blue whales and Kendrick Lamar again and again and again, actually. And then information about microplastics. I found out that you shouldn't be using dishwasher pods because they're putting microplastics on your plates that you don't come off and then you eat them. I'm like, I apparently need to be very concerned with seed oils. I just found out. Okay, this is all information, and the information just keeps coming at us and coming at us. And I feel like we are in a time where the information is moving so fast, we're finding ourselves trying to find the right information. And it's difficult because at times in my life, a lot of times in my life, I have tried to protect myself with right information, okay? I literally come from a family of academics, so information is very important. And I'm not here to say it's not important, but at times when I have tried to protect myself with the right information, the right theology, the right ideology, the right things, the right boundaries, all the right things, I have often missed the invitation that's in front of me. It's funny because I've gotten a handful of Instagram message or different things over the past several months of people asking for me to say something about what's happening in Gaza. And my response has always been the same of I do not feel prepared. I don't feel prepared, and I don't feel like I have enough information. And even people here at this church are like, what are you going to say? And I'm like, none of us feel prepared. None of us feel prepared, and we don't have all the information. And in the past several weeks, I've been watching these students all over our country as they've gathered and they've made these protests. And, I love college students. My first career of however many I'll have before I'm gone. Already I'm up there. But my first career was in higher education. And sometimes we talk about high school students or college students, the youths, as they say, and we say things like, these are the leaders of the future. In the past few weeks, I've been like, I think these are the leaders of the now. I think they're doing it. And what's so interesting to me is that I've been crippled in a lot of ways by trying to always have right information and protect myself with the right information and know all the information. And as I'm watching these students, knowing all of these students who are doing this, they don't have all the right information. They have just accepted an invitation and something in them that said, this doesn't feel right, and that invitation is going to draw me to some kind of action to say, I don't like what's happening in this world. And the reality is, you don't need all the information to accept the invitation. I can say, oh my gosh, yes, people are dying, and that's just not good. And if they pulled me into a meeting of the world leaders and said, what should we do next? I'm out. I'm out of my depth. I don't actually know. There are still so many things I don't know, and I still feel unprepared and uninformed, but I'm trying to allow myself to not let that keep me from the invitation. Because when I think about what this parable is saying, and when I think about the reality that we are given from Jesus, that we are not seeking the right information, but that we are trying to seek an invitation, that we are trying to be the kind of soil that grows crops that are reflective of the kingdom of God, that is such a long and slow and ongoing practice. And in our life, everything moves so fast and so fast and so fast. And I'm just here to say this morning, if you are processing things and you are looking at things and you are looking at the world and it takes you time and you want to move slow and you want things to grow roots, that's okay. You could see 5,000 different things in a minute and they all feel very important, and that is extremely overwhelming. And what this parable is talking about is the reality that good soil and crops and things, it takes time to take roots and to grow roots. And those roots and those crops, by the way, are meant to look like the kingdom. And in the kingdom of God, power structures do get confronted, and the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And every single person has human dignity, and that's incredible, and I'm not there yet. And I know I'm not there yet. Because sometimes when I encounter these things where I'm like, every single person has dignity, and the first shall be last, and I want to go in here, and I want to undo all the tables, and I want to flip over, and I want to say all these things, and I want to be a part, and I want to be like Jesus, and I want to be like the kingdom. It's very, very hard, because what I actually crave more a lot of times is just the right information. I'm like, I don't want the invitation to figuring out what this means for me and how I can do this, and can I accept an invitation without the right information, without all the information, and can I sit in this nuance? And it's hard because I think about things that are going on in our world, and even in our city. I'm like, because I don't have all the right information, it still makes me sad that so many people don't have homes in LA. And again, if Karen Bass said, come to my office, what's the solution? I don't have one. I don't have all the information, but I can still accept the invitation of knowing that what I'm seeing doesn't align with the crops that I'm trying to grow and experience around the kingdom of God. And that sitting in that tension and that dichotomy and that juxtaposition is very hard. It's very hard. I would much rather just have the information and be like, I'm right, all these people are wrong, and here's exactly how you can fix it. And that's something that literally Jesus never did. He was like, we were like, this is right and this is wrong, how do we fix it? And he was like, there was a woman walking. And you're like, oh my God, just tell us, And he never did. And so here we are, and all of these things are wrong. All of these things do not look like the kingdom. All of these crops are getting choked out by thorns. All of these things are happening, and we're sitting here looking for right answers and right moves. And I'm not to say that there aren't moves to be made and things to be done, but the invitation is for us to figure out and sit with what it means to grow crops that look like the kingdom and then exist inside of this world that looks so differently from it. And that goes beyond what's happening in the world, what's happening in our city. It goes into what's happening in our families. I am such an intellectual person that sometimes I'll be like in therapy and I'm like, da 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 da. And my therapist is like, you didn't say anything. Or at the very least, you're not feeling anything. I'm like, no, yeah, that's the point of talking. Because it's hard to sit in that tension when the roots are growing and we're trying to farm crops and we're trying to do all these things and we're trying to be reflective of the kingdom in this world that seems to be juxtaposed against it. And that's hard in our families. I'm like, I know what I want my family to look like. I'm sad about these things, but I don't have all the exact answers of how to be with some of these people that I have not had contact with, and I don't know how to fix that, and I don't know what the conversation looks like. So then I feel like I can't feel the grief of it, because if I feel the grief of it, then something's wrong. But if something's wrong and I feel the grief, then they're like, what are you going to do? And if I don't have the answer of what to do, then I'm like, then I shouldn't feel the grief, right? And then I'm looking at all these things happening around the world, and I'm like, well, I can't feel, if I let myself feel the grief of it, but I don't have an action plan to fix it, where does that leave me? It leaves us right where Jesus was talking to us most of the time. It leaves us right in the place where we are trying to prune and grow these crops and understand how to live in a way of the kingdom of Jesus in a world that looks nothing like it. And that's not to say, like, we are in the world but not of it, like all these things. I'm just saying we're trying to follow a Jesus who was so wildly countercultural to all the systems and power structures and social norms of the day. And then we are living in a world where we are trying to experience that has more information and more connection and all these things than it's ever had. And we have more issues, and we have all these family members, and we have world things, and we have all these things going on, and we're sitting in that tension. And I was thinking about this, and I was like, okay, reading this parable, okay, you got to have ears to hear, you got to do all these things. And I was like, oh, I just want to very clearly acknowledge I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I read things that Jesus said, and I'm like, that's awesome. Not there, and not close. And something that this parable just gives me so much hope in, that I just want to give us hope in today, is God is constantly giving us invitation, not just information. It's not on us to find all the right answers for every move we make every day, to have all the right answers for everything that is wrong and unjust in the world, to have all the right answers for how to fix our families, to have all the right answers of how to do a relationship and then it never gets hard and everything's perfect. All the right answers, that doesn't exist. But we do have a God that is constantly giving us invitation to experience the disruption that happens in our own spirit when we see something that doesn't look like the kingdom that we so long for. A God that gives us invitation to sit and to marinate and to grow roots and to meet people and to have conversation, and for those roots to be watered, and for those roots to be watered, and then we get opportunities to experience something, and we experience hope or transformation, or we reconcile with family, and then those crops grow a little bit more, and then we encounter something good in the world, and we see something doing, and we confront a power structure, and then those crops grow even more, and they grow 20 or 30 or 60 or 100. That's our invitation. And that invitation is slow, it's long, and it is so uncomfortable. What I liked about being the kind of evangelical I was before now, because I'm not too afraid to say it was awesome, okay? I had all the answers. I loved being like 21 and knowing everything. Like it was amazing, okay? Like I really enjoyed it. Like someone would come to me and be like, what about this? I'd be like, Romans 12:2. Like, you know what I mean? I'm on it. You have, what about this going on in the world? Nope, not a problem. Solved it. I already got it. I'm way ahead of you. What about this? Well, this earth isn't real anyway. It's just temporary, so not a big deal. And man, was that awesome. It felt so good. I want that so much more than I want to sit in the invitation of grieving without a plan. I want it more than I want to sit in the information of being angry without a road forward. I like that so much better than just feeling so torn and conflicted sitting between all these things. But if I look back at my life, and I look at the lives around me, and I look at the people that I admire, it's the ones who sat there that got us to where we're going. Those are the people. Those are people who are willing to sit in that, to let the roots grow, to not be rushed, to not be pushed, to not be choked out by thorns, okay, or burnt by the sun, okay, which is drastic. But to people who are willing to say, I'm going to water, I'm going to have ears to hear, and I'm going to learn as I grow and live on this planet things that hit me, things that I should be listening to, things that I should be aware of. When I can tell it's the voice of God or it's the voice of someone telling me Kylie Minogue is gay music, or God saying, yeah, that's why I like her, okay? I want to have ears to hear, and that just takes time, and that takes a lot of discomfort. And that is so not hopeful. But that is unfortunately everything I had to say. When I worked at this church, this former church I worked at in the life where I knew everything and it was awesome, the rule for preaching was you always have to tie a bow with the gospel. So like at the end of every sermon, like a bow had to be tied with the gospel, which is basically like, so I would have just preached that sermon, I'd been like, but lucky for us, okay? Lucky for us, okay? All the discomfort you were gonna feel happened on the cross. And you don't have to feel any of it. And then we would all go to brunch. But one of the biggest changes in my faith and my spirituality happened when I realized that Jesus did not suffer for us, Jesus suffered with us. That when we look at this life that we are following, this Jesus that we have signed up for, this Jesus didn't say, oh, I'm taking all of this so you don't have to feel it. This Jesus said, oh, I know what it's like to feel that, and I'm living with these stories and these ideas because I have suffered too. To live is to suffer. To love is to suffer. And I know what that's like. So no, we don't get a free pass because Jesus did it. We get to enter into that discomfort and that suffering and what it means to be human and to love people and to believe that every single person on the face of the earth has dignity, and then to watch that not be a reality over and over and over and over again. That's the invitation. It's not that we get to go to brunch because if it's in God's will, it's in God's bill. Jesus paid it all. Which is something me and my wife say often, shopping. I love that there's no easy fix. I love that I don't know everything. I love that I just feel so uncomfortable right now. Because I know that that is how I keep becoming and becoming and becoming and becoming and having ears to hear and hear and hear and grow these crops and crops and crops and crops, crops that look like the kingdom. That's the only way. It's going to be long, it's going to be slow, and it's going to take us the rest of our lives. I said it with a happy, the rest of our lives. But the reality is I really do think that's beautiful. I think that is a beautiful part of what we have all signed up for, right? At the end of the day, at this point, if you're in a church like New Abbey, it's because you believe in the message of Jesus. Not necessarily the information or true facts, or you feel safe because we have the right theology or the right answers, but because you want to try to do this thing and work it out with a community of people. And that's exciting. And I want to remind us all that while we may have arrived at certain places, it's okay to sit and work it out with those people who are still watering that part of their crops. That it's okay if it takes time. It's okay that you feel like everyone in the world understands something and you haven't gotten there yet. It's okay to move slow. We live in the fastest, again, I'll stop talking about it sometime, but Kendrick put 4 songs out in 32 hours, okay? Things are moving fast now. But I'm just going to keep advocating for a slow life, a slow burn, for watering crops, for farming, for fine-tuning my ears constantly of what I need to hear, for being led by other people, for seeing something and allowing it to hit my spirit. I'll end with this story about my dad. My dad's great, but something he used to do, it just used to bother me so much. He would not let me and my sister say, I don't know, if it was a question about us. So, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you think about this? I don't know. That was not acceptable in my house. Every time he'd be like, okay, if I'm asking you something about you either know, and you haven't figured out how to communicate it or verbalize it, or you know and you don't want to share it for some reason, or you know and then he would go on this whole thing and be like, I want Chipotle, but leave me alone. But it was such an interesting practice, and I'm very grateful for it. And at the end of the day, I feel like I got a lot of confidence from that experience of being able to say what I need and what I want and these things. But it's such a reminder that sometimes we look to everyone but ourselves to understand whether or not something feels right. We have given away and allowed external authorities to have so much room in our lives that sometimes our own voices feel unfamiliar, when reality is we are the experts on what God is doing in our lives, and we should be able to know if something hits us well, and we have that ability to recognize the divinity that lives within us, and we know when something connects to that or something doesn't. I don't have to tell you that. Another pastor doesn't have to tell you that. Glennon Doyle doesn't have to tell you that, and that's no shade. Love that. But I always laugh. I'm like, so many of my friends left the church, but like Brene Brown is their pastor. They're like, my old pastor, wrong. Everything she says, right. When the reality is we get to take in all the information from these different leaders, from these different experiences, from these different texts, and we should know whether or not that connects to what God is doing in us. There is so much authority and divinity in every single one of us, and the fact that we get to practice that and live that out in real time is so freaking beautiful. It's not about the people with the microphones. It's about what God is doing and how that hits, and you have ears to hear whether or not that sits right with you. And not that you will know what to do if it doesn't, not that you will have the immediate answers, but sitting in that tension is where we get all the good stuff. So you're going to grab the same 3 or 4 people around you and answer this question. What are you being invited into right now? Enjoy.